the load. He's trampling out the vintage where the grapes of wrath were stowed. He hath loosed the faithful lightning of his terrible swift sword. His truth is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Oh, glory, glory, hallelujah. His truth is marching on. He is sounding for the trumpet that shall never call retreat. He is sifting out the hearts of men before his judgment seat. Oh, be swift, my soul, to answer him. Be jubilant, my feet. Our God is marching on. Oh, glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Oh, glory, glory, hallelujah. Our God is marching on. Christ was born across the sea, with a glory in his bosom that transfigures you and me. Now as he died to make men holy, let us live to make men free, while God is marching.
Mark time. March. Color guard. Halt. Left. Face. Present. Colors.
At this time, we will ask Mr. Basil Berchekis to come forward, and he's going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by our national anthem, and we ask that you remain standing for that. It will be delivered by the Calhoun Community College Chorale, Mr. Granville, Oldham, conductor. Mr. Berchekis, if you will come forward at this time.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which we stand, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Oh, say, can you see the dawn's early light? What so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallant.
Please be seated. Go ahead and take a moment and rub the goosebumps off your arms. And I'm just going to tell you right now, if that didn't get you, you can't get got. So thank you to the chorale. I was thinking this morning about something that I thought that I would read to you. It's very brief, but we all know that this is Veterans Day here. It is on November the 11th every year, as you all know, and all of us in this room know about the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. And all around the world, it's Veterans Day in one form or another for our allies from the Great War, the First World War. And in England, they're celebrating today, and in Australia, and in France, and other nations who were our allies during the First World War. The First World War also produced some of the greatest literature that the world has ever seen. And probably people in here know the most famous poet from World War I, a British soldier named Wilfred Owen, and his poem called Dulce et decorum est. But Wilfred Owen had a good friend and a mentor, a British poet, whose name is a German name, but he was a British soldier. His name was Siegfried Sassoon. And he grew up in England and spent time in Wales, and his boyhood friend and he were almost inseparable, and they spent a lot of time hunting and playing in a place called Devil's Wood. And one day during combat, Siegfried Sassoon, who was an officer, got news that his childhood friend had just been killed over yonder. And so, of course, he was heartbroken, and he wrote this poem as a result of learning about the death of his friend. And I thought I would read it to you this morning. It's quite brief. It's called The Investiture. And all veterans will think about your comrades, and I know it'll mean a lot to you. It's from Siegfried Sassoon. God, with a roll of honor in his hand, sits welcoming heroes who have died, while sorrowless angels on either side stand easy in Elysium's meadowland. Then you come shyly through the garden gate, wearing a blood-soaked bandage on your head, and God says something kind because you're dead and homesick and discontented with your fate. Oh, if I were there, we'd snowball death with skulls, or ride away to hunt in Devil's Wood with ghosts of puppies that we walked of old. But you're alone, and solitude annuls our earthly jokes, and strangely wise and good, you roam forlorn along the streets of gold. It's a little poem called The Investiture, again by a man named Siegfried Sassoon, who lived actually until the 1960s. I was talking about our students who are veterans, and if I am fortunate, I get to have some of them in class, and this year is no exception. And two of them have agreed to come and be with us today and speak with you. And it says here, student testimony, so I guess you're going to testify, Lance and Keela. We'll see. You do whatever you'd like. But I would like to ask on stage first Miss Keela Gitson, who's sitting here, and who, as she walks up, in 9 days from today, will be officially retired from the United States Air Force. Come on up, Keela. And this is her husband, Carl. Yes?
Yes.
So don't miss him later.
All right, you're taking away from my speech here. Now I got to figure out. Thank you. Normally, I shy away from public speaking. You probably didn't know that. I hate it. But when Dr. Cross asked me to speak, I was too honored to say no. And he offered me some bonus points in class. Just kidding. So, as he said, my name is Keela Gitson, Master Sergeant, U.S. Air Force. Soon to be retired in exactly 9 days. I'm so happy to be back home. I was born and raised here, so Sad to be leaving my military family, though. I'm going to miss them. So here is my very short story. 22 years ago, as a young 18-year-old girl, I got on a plane for the first time and flew out of Montgomery to join the Air Force. I had no clue what I was really signing up for. My dad is an Army vet and served in the Korean War, but he never really talked about it. All I knew was I wanted to see the world, and I wasn't ready for college. My friend convinced me Air Force was the way to go. For the first 8 years of my career, I worked in logistics and didn't really get to see a whole lot of action. I was stationed in some amazing places, though. I spent a few years in Italy and did exactly what I said I wanted to do. I was awarded the opportunity to see the world, and it was beautiful. It wasn't until I moved back to the States and joined a combat rescue unit in Florida, working in aircraft maintenance, that I discovered myself and what exactly it was that I was doing in the military. It wasn't that I didn't know what the military represented. I was just younger and a little more naive. I cross-trained to become an aircraft mechanic on the HH-60 Pavehawk. My world truly changed from this point. I went on my first deployment to Afghanistan. I had never seen anything like it. We were working with all these different nations hand in hand. These beautiful, brave, intelligent men and women were risking their lives to protect their country's freedoms. It is such an amazing thing to witness. When I came back from this deployment, I had a whole new outlook. This was my life, and I knew from that point what I wanted to do. This was my family, too. Working in combat rescue and just being a part of saving lives and being part of something bigger than myself was the greatest feeling I'd ever felt. I also met my amazing husband and 3 beautiful stepchildren. My husband has been in the Air Force for over 30 years and soon will be retiring, too. Luckily, he loves our great state of Alabama. This made it easier to convince him that we should retire here. So, and this is a story I wanted to share. This was a very, very proud day for me. So, a few years ago, I was given the opportunity to join the Space Coast Honor Flight. It is an all-volunteer organization that raises money to send vets who served in World War II, the Korean War, Vietnam, and recent conflicts to Washington, D.C. to see the memorials. Everyone who volunteered was assigned one specific vet to escort on the flight and show them around. I was assigned to escort a World War II vet, Miss Mimi Howard. I can honestly say this was my proudest moment of my whole career. It was a very emotional day from start to finish. We boarded a bus in Melbourne and was escorted by the fine police unit there all the way to the airport. People had lined the streets with American flags and was waving us by. We got to the airport and everyone boarded the plane. As we taxied, there were fire trucks lined up along the taxiway to wave and see us out. And it didn't stop there. When we arrived in D.C., we were welcomed there from every branch of the military. They really rolled out the red carpet for our amazing vets, and they were so appreciative. We left there and went straight to the memorials because we only had that one day to show them around and then fly back to Florida that evening. Once we arrived at the memorials and started showing them around, most of our vets were very overwhelmed and extremely emotional. Most of them knew a lot of people who lost their lives in these wars. As I stood there watching them look at the names and take it all in, it was hard to hold back the tears. It was a special day, and I was so blessed to get to be a part of it. These are the heroes who made it possible for us to enjoy the freedoms we have today. I am so proud and honored to be able to say I am a member of the most selfless group of American patriots, a United States veteran. I salute you all, and thank you for letting me be a part of this special occasion. God bless.
My goodness, Master Sergeant. You're going to get my desk from now, are you? You can stop shaking now. By the way, while we sort of calmed down a little bit, that was lovely and wonderful, and thank you, and quite moving. And yeah, it was yes. By the way, certainly not to put the light on me. If you're my students out there, y'all are already laughing. Yeah, they say, of course, that's what he does. I mentioned my Uncle Herschel a minute ago. I went to the Army on April the 21st, 1970. It was a Tuesday. People sometimes say, how do you know? If you'd been with me, you'd know too. My daddy, Uncle Herschel's brother, had been in the Second World War. Was in the Army during the Second World War. And I got up that morning early because a friend of mine was going to come and pick me up and take me to the airport to go off to Fort Jackson, South Carolina. And my father walked me out to the car, and he was never at a loss for anything to say. But he just stood there and looked at me like he was trying to think of something to say. And he finally put out his hand and said these words, "They'll feed you." That was it. He didn't want to exaggerate, you see, and they did. You sometimes couldn't eat it, but they will feed you, won't they, Mitchell? Okay. Well, I hope, Lance, that you were sitting there and relaxing and listening to your classmate Keela talk. Our next speaker is Mr. Lance Voorhees, and he is also, I'm honored to have him also in my class, and he is a United States Marine, and I'm going to ask him to come up right now and speak with you. Lance.
Good morning. Where are my Marines? Do not be fooled, I am not outnumbered. That's all right. All right, I know we've got veterans in the crowd. Where are my infantrymen at? There's two other people that have made poor decisions like me. Good to see you. I'm kidding, of course. I've spent the last 5 years in the Marine Corps Reserves, and though I haven't deployed yet, I've learned what it means to stand ready over these past 5 years. So for my veterans in here, let's just take a quick trip down memory lane. When you're in the military, it's a different language. You pick up on a lot of weird little phrases and expressions and cliches, and a lot of them are not family friendly. I tried to pick some that are. You learn them anyway. But I just compiled a list, so if this is confusing to some of you, don't worry, I'll circle back around. For my veterans, good initiative, bad judgment. If it ain't raining, we ain't training. The more you sweat in peace, the less you bleed in war. You're only as strong as your weakest link. Pays to be a winner, hurts to be a loser. Embrace the suck. I love it. Gear drift is a gift. And finally, I know you better be there 15 minutes prior, so you can stand by. You're not moving fast enough, so you better get ready to hurry up and wait. Yeah. If your head is spinning right now, it's okay. And if you're cringing, it's probably because all this is a little too fresh. But we have a lot of expressions, we have a lot of little rhymes and funny things that we say, but they're not all without purpose. Some of them are actually intentionally meant to be that way so you remember them, so you turn them over in your mind and you don't forget them. And one of those for me is the first principle of Marine Corps leadership, and that is know yourself and seek self-improvement. Know yourself and seek self-improvement. Improvement, most people, they're probably going to think physical fitness. Gotta improve myself and get fit, eat right. Absolutely, those are great things. They're important things. But it's not just there. Where are my students at? Yeah, quite a few of you. Right, we're all here to seek improvement. We're improving our minds so we can get that degree, that certificate, that skill set so that we can contribute one day. We can actually make something of ourselves. That's important. And then finally, the one that's the most neglected is character. Because if you're the strongest person in the room, the smartest person in the room, and you don't have good character to back it up, you have nothing. And I believe I can get some strong agreement from the veterans on this one, because we've seen both good leadership and poor leadership during our time. What makes this one truly difficult, though, this principle, and it is the first principle of leadership. There's quite a few, but this is number one. And what makes it particularly difficult, it is painful. It takes a great deal of humility to seek self-improvement. It takes a great deal of humility to know yourself, because a lot of times you don't know. You might have blind spots and you can't see. And if you think that you don't need to improve, just ask your best friend or your spouse, because they'll bring you right back down to earth real quick. Yeah, ask me how I know. But it does. It hurts to look at someone and say, hey, where am I messed up? Where do I need to improve? But it's pain with purpose. Seeking self-improvement starts with you. It's dependent on you, but it is not about you. It's not. Those awards that you receive, those promotions, that high-profile friend group you may find yourself with, money, it's all byproducts. Those are just good bonuses. At the end of the day, you seek self-improvement because it's not about you. Because it's bigger than that. There is much more at stake. It is about the man or woman on your left and right, every day, all day. And if it's about anything else, you picked the wrong group. And I say all this because it carries. This doesn't stop once you're out of the military. And a lot of you may be wondering that right now, like, thanks, guy. You're telling me all this stuff, and it really doesn't apply to me, but it does. Because at some time, somewhere in your life, there will be someone who depends on you. And that may be family, it may be friends, co-workers, employers, classmates, professors. Someone will depend on you. And the question you have to ask yourself is, am I willing to let that person down, those people down? For us that have served, that's a difficult question to ask. Because you know that you have to put forth that effort to prevent that from happening all day, every day. So to leave you with this thought, know yourself, seek self-improvement, because there's much more at stake, because it's not about you. Semper Fi, thank you.
My goodness. So there. Dean Estel, please remember that Randy Cross chose these two students to talk. Did I do well or what? Let's give them another hand. Yeah, don't give yourselves any credit. By the way, here I go again. I mentioned April the 21st, 1970. We finally made it to Fort Jackson, South Carolina, and everybody was angry. They were all screaming and hollering and carrying on. I wanted to say, hey, aren't we on the same side? But I decided not to do that. And the drill sergeant lined us up and asked us who had been to college. Well, I remembered the advice I'd been given, don't volunteer for nothing. So I just stood there, and he said, I'm going to go in that's called the orderly room, and I'm going to go in there and get your 201 file. I didn't know what that was. And I'm going to come back, and I'll know who went to college. And then I guess we'll see. Well, one other scholar at the far end of the squad and I raised our hands. And he came and he told us that we were going to go on police call. And I had no idea what that meant, if we were going to call the police. Anyway, he explained that you had to get down on your belly and crawl across the area, as he called it, picking up contraband. And then he said, I'm going to tell you how to do it, so listen careful. Now, I've read several books in my life, but I never read a better sentence than the one he uttered after that. He said, quote, if it ain't green, it don't grow, it don't wiggle, or God didn't make it, pick it up. Yeah, I'll be glad to. If it ain't green, it don't grow, it don't wiggle, or God didn't make it, pick it up. So we started crawling around. This other boy's name was Randy, too, come to find out. And we got back, and I had chewing gum papers and popsicle sticks and cigarette butts and pop tops and chewing gum wrappers. And there was one half of a dried oak leaf. And he reached in and he picked it up and he dangled it in front of my face and said, what is your name? Randy Cross. I didn't know what this called. I'd use a title. Cross. It's a strange name for an atheist. You are an atheist, aren't you, Cross? No, drill sergeant. He said, who made this leaf? I said, God made it, drill sergeant. So he repeated his sentence. He said, get down and give me 10 push-ups, and if you ain't counting, they ain't. So I had to say 1 drill sergeant, 2 drill sergeant, finally 10 drill sergeant. He said, now then, get back down and give God 10 for denying his glory. One God. I had to give God 10 push-ups because of a half a leaf. So there. Yeah. Thank you. I know I'm not supposed to tell stories here, but I wanted to. Now, I am eagerly anticipating what we're going to do next. As you can see from your program, if you've looked at it, this morning's speaker is a distinguished patriot who carried out many high-profile positions during his 20 years of service in the United States Army. He distinguished himself repeatedly, whether with the Secret Service of the United States or the Counterterrorism Task Force. His duty stations included Ethiopia, Korea, Japan, Panama, Germany, and I'm sure many others. It really is indeed a privilege for me to be able to introduce to you a man of extraordinary abilities and dedication to his country. Please make welcome former Sergeant First Class, Mr. Rex Davis. Mr. Davis.
Thank you very much. I tell you what, trying to follow that is just really difficult. I am an American fighting man, soldier, sailor, Marine, Coast Guardsman, or airman. That is what a veteran is, and that's what a veteran has always been. Throughout our history, our communities have welcomed and appreciated our veterans. From the Revolutionary War, private organizations came together to make sure that these veterans were honored. Not only the ones that served in combat, which we can never forget, they're the most important, but also those that didn't serve in combat, those that supported the operations of those combat troops around the world. And that's what my story's about. I never served in combat. And for many of us that never served in combat, but yet served in the military, that is extremely difficult. It's very difficult. And none of you would understand it that weren't in the military. But what I managed to do somehow or another is manage my career from the day I went in the military. I personally managed my career. I was taught by good people, taught how to manage that career, and taught how to get what I needed out of the military, how to learn. My first experience with the military was in 1963, my first time in the 3rd grade. We had an Air Force base next door, Goodfellow Air Force Base. It was a security command facility, and we had a lot of kids that went to Glenmore Elementary School with me, and we had these huge windows outside my 3rd grade classroom. I can remember the windows, but not the chalkboard. And helicopters would auto-rotate all day long. They'd go out there in the morning and they'd just fly around. All of a sudden they'd cut their power and they'd glide back down to earth. And it was just amazing to me. So what did I do when I left school that afternoon? I followed the children from the military base housing area and went on board the installation and went straight to the flight line. And for the next week, I stood at the flight line watching at the street flight line, watching these helicopters being towed in the hangars and all the men working on the helicopters. We didn't have women in the service at that time in that capacity. But one day, a man came to me from one of the helicopters. His name was Stanton Nelson. He was an airman first class, and he took me by the hand, literally, and walked me over to the Piasecki H-21 Workhorse helicopter, put me inside the helicopter in the pilot's seat, and they hooked up the tow machine to it, and we rode the brakes into the hangar. That was it. I was hooked. My dad was in the Air Corps in China, Philippines, and New Guinea. And I never dreamed of going in the Air Corps. I always wanted to be an Army man. In 1959, my aunt and uncle bought me a Eisenhower uniform, and I wore that thing everywhere. So I always wanted to be a soldier. Fortunately for me, we moved to California in 1968, my first year in high school. Now, Texas was fine, but California was neat. And the reason is, our school was a polytech. It had all different kind of technical schools, colleges throughout the facility. One was agriculture. And okay, well, I was a cowboy, why not? So I kind of got involved in the agriculture department, where almost all of my academics was in the agriculture department. Bookkeeping, history, science, all that kind of stuff. All those credits were there. Also, I went to night school. I went to the community college to get credits for graduation. I wasn't the smartest guy in the room, but I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to be in law enforcement. I wanted to be a cop. I was a firefighter, a volunteer firefighter, and later became a firefighter EFF, but that was just a start to get into investigating fires. So I was pretty up to date on what to do and how to do things. Well, one day one of my advisors in the agriculture department came to me and said, "Rex, we want you to escort someone around Southern California." I had a car. I said, "Sure, no problem." And they brought me this guy, a little bitty fellow, Mesfin McConan. He was a college student at Cal Poly. He was from Ethiopia, and he was quite a character. He was really, really funny. He was a lot of fun to be with. He wanted to learn agriculture. That's why he went to Cal Poly, big agricultural school and engineering school. So I took Minister of Agriculture McConan all over Southern California to all the different facilities and showed him what was going on. Well, a few months later, I decided I'd had enough school. I had all the credits I needed to graduate, so I decided to graduate midterm and go in the military. When I got in the military, I realized that there was several doors open to me. I had a contract for law enforcement, and a contract for Korea. But as I reached my training facility, the Army Security Agency picked me up and asked me if I wanted to be an ASAMP. Oh, what's that? Well, Army Security Agency is now part of the National Security Agency. So it's pretty good stuff. It's a foot in the door. And then they asked me if I wanted to go to Ethiopia. I thought, well, why would I want to go to Ethiopia? I said, well, we have an assignment you might like. And here I am, a 18-year-old kid, almost 19, and they're asking me if I want to do something. I thought the Army didn't ask you if you wanted to do something. They usually told you. Well, this required me to void my contract, as most of us in the military know. And when you void your contract, you're at the mercy of them. No, Rex don't do that. I knew better. So I kept my contract, but they said, well, would you go TAD or TDY? And I said, sure. So when I arrived in Ethiopia from Greece on the embassy aircraft, they go to all the different embassies by way of Khartoum and Cairo. I got off the plane, and there meeting me was Minister of Agriculture, Mr. McConan. And he took me around Ethiopia for the next week. And I asked him, of course, when we were in the car driving off, do my bosses know that I'm here? And he said, yeah, I took care of that. No worry. Okay? Well, the week later I come back, I check into the hotel where my room was. We didn't have barracks. Cagnew Station, I was assigned to them for ration quarters in UCMJ, but I wasn't assigned to them, I was assigned to the consulate's office. And they said, well, where have you been? We've been looking for you for a week, you know? And my commander, a Navy officer, was pretty upset. And of course, when I told him the story, you can imagine what he thought. Yeah, right. So anyway, I ended up being a part of a very unique team. And was the writer of the CIA fact book for agriculture in Ethiopia, 1972. And that's quite an accomplishment for a 19-year-old boy. Of course, when I say I wrote the fact book, you know that there were many people involved, many edits, and we have two separate books. One's classified, one's unclassified. But that was my tour in Ethiopia. I went from there to Korea and then on to Japan as a TDY assignment to the embassy from the same people that asked me to come to Ethiopia. They wanted me to advise the embassy on the use of military working dogs in a crowd control situation. Well, the Army Regulation 190-1 simply states that military working dogs can't be used in crowd control. So my job was pretty short. As a result, I got assigned to Japanese police force, defense force, and I trained with them for the next 4 months. Came back to Fort MacArthur, where I worked with the Metro Division of the Los Angeles Police Department on AWOL apprehension, and 3 months later, I went on a penetration team with the Special Forces and military intelligence, where we penetrated nuclear weapon sites, tried to get in, and then on to regular law enforcement duties. Later on, at the City of San Francisco, I was assigned to administrative law enforcement. I was an investigator, and my job was the National Crime Information Center and California Law Enforcement Telecommunications Center, computerized law enforcement. This placed me in a position where I was traveling all over the world, Pacific Rim, Alaska, Hawaii, because the 6th United States Army was responsible for that area. As a staff officer on the Provost Marshal's team, I was assigned to the Counterterrorism Task Force as a writer and evaluator. And from there, I went on to bomb disposal. I left the Military Police Corps, went into bomb disposal. After I arrived at Fort Irwin, California, I was assigned to Secret Service duties for the presidential elections of 79 to 80. And with that, on the election of Ronald Reagan, I was assigned to him at his Pacific Palisades home. And there, one night, while counting jelly beans, literally, we had a security trailer, the whole area was blocked off. And anyone coming in, going out, had to go through the security perimeter. Bomb disposal people simply evaluated stuff. They looked at stuff, cars, the jelly beans that came in, any packages we checked and opened, things like that. Anytime the president would leave the home, before he came back, we would search the home. Well, one night we're sitting there out on the perimeter just talking, and here comes this funny fellow with a Greek hat on and a beautiful woman with long blonde hair, medium blonde hair. And she looked familiar, and I thought, well, who's that? Someone said it was Captain and Tennille. They were bringing us cookies. And then a few days later, while sitting on the post, Bubbly, Lawrence Welks, shows up with all of his beautiful women in his long limousine. So, we that serve in a non-combat area, we have some advantages, I guess. But the point is, throughout my military career as a non-combatant and living in the real world, if you would, we lost 13 people that I knew, either in bomb disposal or law enforcement. 13 people, that's a lot of people. Law enforcement community is very small. And in bomb disposal, we usually lose at least 2 people at a time when we lose people because we work in 2-man teams. On one case, in Southern California at Fort Rosecrans, they were preparing to load their vehicles up to bring them up to Fort Irwin to dispose of some firecrackers that had been confiscated from the Mexican border. While loading these firecrackers, they backed their truck up into the bunker, into the side of the bunker, and they were loading these black plastic bags of fireworks. And for some reason, some of the fireworks ignited, and 3 of our very young people were killed in that firework accident. Several others were injured. But just because you serve in peacetime and you serve in a non-combat area does not mean that you're not in harm's way. Law enforcement military police law enforcement in their capacity in garrison are exactly the same as law enforcement anywhere else in the world. Your bomb disposal people, they do bomb disposal work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and it's the same thing whether they're in combat or they're not in combat. And these are some of the things I wanted to bring to your attention and let you know that we're not slackers. We're really not. We're out there, we're working hard, but it is very difficult for us as military men and women who do not go to combat areas. It hurts. And it's sometimes we choose jobs that simply are not directly related to combat. But in my case, I certainly could have gone at any time. I didn't not want to go. We just sometimes don't have the opportunity to go. But we have to thank those who do serve in combat areas. And because you can't believe how many young men and women today that have multiple tours in combat areas. And these are hard tours in combat areas. My son, who was in the Navy originally and then transferred to the Army, he spent 9 years in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Kuwait. 9 years of his life. And it's just hard to understand how they go through it. Some people have as many as 9 tours or 10 tours within 20 years. That's a lot of tours. But I want to thank Calhoun Community College for having me. This has been a wonderful experience for me, an opportunity to tell you some war stories and tell you how I ended up here. And I had a wonderful career. And anyone thinking about going in the military, remember that you own your own career. And you can manage that career if you understand how the system works. And that's exactly what I did. I kept changing jobs because I wanted to eventually get out of the Army and go into law enforcement. So I wanted to have a well-rounded background, and that's how I handled my career. Well, thank you very much, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. What an extraordinary career you have had, and how fascinating to hear the details of some of it. This is one of my favorite parts of the program every year. It's called Salute to Our Veterans, and the Calhoun Jazz Band is under the direction of Mr. Joshua Couts, and you'll figure out in a hurry if you haven't done this before, if you haven't heard this medley. It is a medley of military, the different branch songs. And so when you hear the song of your branch, if you would please stand, and then you'll know when to sit. Because I know a Marine's not going to be standing up when they're playing the caisson song for the Army. I know how that works. But when you hear your song, if you'll please stand, we would appreciate it. And I know we're going to enjoy this part of the program. And so now, Mr. Couts.